The other candidate in this race has spent her entire life making money for special interests, and I will tell you, she's made plenty of money for them, and she's been taking plenty of money out for herself. Hillary Clinton has perfected the politics of personal profit and even theft. She ran the State Department like her own personal hedge fund, doing favors for oppressive regimes, and many others, and really many, many others, in exchange for cash, pure and simple, folks.
Okay, I don't need to translate that. Donald Trump calling Hillary Clinton a thief and a liar and saying she traded political favors for cash. Didn't stop there. Here he is just last week.
I think Hillary is very weak. I think she's pathetic. I think she should be in jail for what she did with her emails, okay? She should be in jail.
All right, let's bring in our legal panel to weigh in on not just the Trump allegations, but also if you can say anything as long as it's a public figure. Let's bring in our panel. Jimmy Kasuris. Jim is a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Mayo Bartlett. He's an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett, PLLC, and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Okay, I talked before with the guys, PolitiFact, and you guys might even follow this. What they'll do is they'll look at usually commercials that'll go out, and then they'll parse through what's true or not. This one, they basically said, is an all-timer. Now, you can say somebody's soft on crime or whatever, and that could be a point of distinction or discretionary, how you read it. But when you call somebody a thief, forget about impugning character. You're making criminal allegations against them. The Benghazi thing, for example, it's not, there was, now I'm getting into too much politics, I grant you, but there was independent commissions, Republican and Democrat led, that looked in. None of that was true about what was going on supposedly at 3 o'clock when the phone call went in. Jimmy, where's the line between, hey, this is politics, this ain't, just kissing babies, they always throw mud around, to this is slander, this is libel.
When you're in the public view, you put yourself in the public view, you are opening yourself up to a certain, I suppose, higher level of scrutiny. But I agree with you. It's unhinged, is what it is. These are criminal allegations. They are slanderous, if not true, potentially. They're made with such specificity, with such intent that in my view, if in fact they're not true, they cross a line. But I don't mean just cross a line. They barrel through. They barrel through the line.
Because there's specifics, Doug, as Jimmy's reference about personal enrichment through both foundation. This was more the husband, obviously Bill Clinton, but nonetheless, and then also in State Department, there was personal enrichment. Now, this is a small little item here, but he talked about her getting something for like a 60-grand piece of jewelry. Well, actually, it's not true. You can be given a gift, but you have to give it over as she did to the government because it's a government property because you're a representative of the government. She never got it or whatever else. Again, small little tidbits, but it ended up with the crux of it being that she treated as a hedge fund or an ATM, whatever he said, her job. If it can be proven that is completely false, can you say whatever at the end of the day? I mean, it sounds good, people saying, oh, Trump's full of it, but is there really any exposure?
Well, you can't say whatever, but she is a public figure, and because she's a public figure, you would have to prove that he knew that it was false, and he made it, or he was reckless about making the statements.
Where's that line between reckless and knowing?
Well, that's facts. You'd have to look at the actual facts. And the thing about something like this is you'd actually have to have a trial about, or depositions and discovery about whether it's true or not. So Hillary Clinton, if she wanted to actually bring a lawsuit, and she never would, you would actually have to do discovery about whether she is actually a thief and whether she did actually take these things, and that would never happen. But what you got to remember is the First Amendment is behind that, and there's a strong right for people to know what's going on in the public. And she is a public figure, and you would have to prove actual malice.
Now, listen, he's the same guy who said that the current president was both a Muslim and also not an American citizen. If you go back to the whole birther scandal, right? and then finally we saw the birth certificate, etc. He didn't know for 100% fact. He may have stated it, but he didn't know that he really had the birth certificate. He said that he was going to go out and prove it, and obviously he didn't. Again, it almost sounds like you're better served from a legal standing to make an allegation without specifics and not doing your research. Because if you do your research and you know better and then you say it, then you could get in trouble. Do I have it right?
I think you do. And to Doug's point, again, you have freedom of speech, but if Hillary Clinton was to pursue a case, she would have to actually prove all of the elements. She'd have to prove that she's not a liar, that she hasn't been a crook. And to your point, it's such a sweeping allegation. He's not saying that she did a particular bad act, but that she's done multiple bad acts. When you do that, now you're opening yourself up to all kinds of specific instances.
Because it could have been broad, because sure, she did enrich herself through speeches. Not that that's illegal or not, but certainly you could say she used her office, like many people before did, to do that. There are allegations, certainly investigations going on as to the email. But when he attaches that specificity, it's a different animal. But let me ask you this. If Donald Trump came out and said, the store owner that I just came out of his restaurant, the guy's a crook and he's poisoning his customers. Is that a different threshold because that's not a public figure?
Absolutely, because now there's no requirement to show actual malice. So now at that point, you are harming a person who didn't ask to be in the public, who didn't put themselves out there. And that person's business can be ruined. They can have all kinds of adverse effects. You don't have to show that that was the intent of the actor. You have to simply show at that point that they defamed that person.
There's a difference between calling somebody a liar. Okay, that's not actionable. You can believe that the person is a liar. There's a difference between saying, I think she should be in jail because of what happened with her emails. That's not actionable. That's his opinion based on what's out there. But that's different from accusing somebody of stealing money from the government while in public office. And that's the specific allegation to which I'm referring.
Yeah.
And, Doug is right. There's never going to be any litigation over it.
Because
But
then
there's
she'd have to
gonna
open
be-
up everything, and,
Well, but
it's
there's-
almost disincentivized to the person who knows what you find in discovery,
She doesn't
right?
need to do
Right.
that, because what's going to happen is, and what is happening is, you now have the fact checking going on for both of them, and that's going to happen, and fact fiction is going to be exposed.
But if you stop and look again, the entire media cycle over the last few days has been that Donald Trump has no money. We're talking about Donald Trump right now. And not only that, we're talking about Donald Trump, and we're talking about Hillary Clinton, and we're talking about who's more trustworthy. We're getting into areas where if you go online and do Google searches about either one, you're going to find lots of things that they don't want to talk about. That only helps him in this situation.
I got to tell you something, Mayo. They say that there's no such thing as bad publicity for lawyers, for doctors. As long as you're in the news, people hear your name. I think that is now having a diminishing effect. In the beginning, it was true. But I
want to
don't
ask you
think that's
one other
happening now.
question. There's talks right now with Cleveland in particular, and Philadelphia, but really Cleveland, that it'll be a very contentious convention. And I'm not just talking within the walls of the Quicken Loan Center where they're going to have this, but outside as well, where protesters will be penned in. We saw this when there was, in New York, when there was a political convention. We've seen this in other places. Wherever I've gone to cover it, there is. But the question is, where does free speech start and stop in terms of where you're allowed to protest, Mayo? And that is, sure, you should be able to be heard, but if you're cordoned off in a certain area, now you can't. But at the other point, when does a person have a right to just enter into a convention without being harassed or threatened or drown out voice of dissent?
Well, I think that we're all over the place there. And you look at people, for instance, we talk about John Kerry and the guy saying, dude, don't tase me, right? And that young man should have been allowed to voice his dissent. He's there. John Kerry even said you should be able to voice your dissent. He was no threat to anyone. It's one thing when people are hurling things at people and they're fighting and it's a threat to public safety, then you ought to be able to put a restriction. But if you're simply at the convention, let's assume you're all Republicans or all Democrats, you have a right to voice your disapproval or your support for something. And because you may not be in the majority doesn't mean that they can put you in a corner somewhere, because eventually, if you're cordoned off far enough away, free speech means nothing because no one gets to hear you.
Conversely,
Well-
people scream when you're going to a speech and you want to be able to hear the speaker. You're not coming there to hear the screamer, right?
Well, the First Amendment is not absolute. The government can put restrictions on time, place, and general restrictions, as long as it's content neutral. They're not doing it because they don't want to hear the words of the person. But you have to look at the circumstances, and as long as they are given a place and a proper time that's content neutral to express themselves, it's perfectly reasonable that they limit them.
All right, I want to get to this next topic. When we come back, 3 branches of government, 3 approaches to deal with gun violence. The legislative branch hasn't done a thing. The executive branch has tried to do something with executive orders, and the judicial branch just did something by doing nothing. We will explain.